Class buffs and Azerite traits are two changing systems coming into the game as we transition from Legion into Battle for Azeroth. Both of them have the potential to be huge balancing pitfalls, and so I'm going to go through the implications of the systems for both dungeons and raids, how much of an impact it's likely to have, the concerns some players have and to what extent they are justified, and what changes in direction the developers have taken which many people are not yet aware of. In this first video, I will run through the implications of Azerite traits as those seem to be more pressing to people at the moment, and then I'll cover class buffs this coming Monday to keep the two topics separate. Blizzard are wanting to rein in the power of Azerite traits at the moment. I learned last week that they want them to be much weaker, and there have now been a number of savage nerfs to them in line with this new policy. People have been expressing concerns about the effects on high mythic keys, with players unable to switch gear between packs or between trash and bosses. So to what extent are these concerns valid? Well, some people do seem to be making a mountain out of a molehill with it, but I'm just thinking that maybe the reason people are up in arms about it is for one of the following two reasons. First, a focus on theory rather than practice. In theory, it harms classes with weaker defensives because they'll need to use the defensive traits, whereas classes with stronger natural defences aren't as badly affected and can rely on their own defensives and take the most offensive traits. But the reality is that the traits are not as powerful as some people seem to think, and nor are they going to be. And they are also not shared with defensive traits anyway. It is of course true that one of your helms might have BIS offensive trait, but another might have your best defensive trait for that dungeon. But the situation where you choose either offensive power or defensive strength is an assumption which may be called into question when you actually look at the Azerite pieces on offer. This is probably why few of the people who are bemoaning the situation are able to come up with concrete examples to strengthen their argument. They haven't really looked at the nitty-gritty. Of course, we haven't seen the raid ones yet, so who knows what will happen there. The ones showing at the moment seem to be duplicates from elsewhere, so the assumption is that they are placeholder for the time being. I don't know that to be the case, however. This could change any day with such rapid build releases. However, although Ian Hazacostas originally said that traits should be in line with two set tier bonus levels of power, they have now changed their mind. They want the power of these traits scaling right back, and have already started to do this. It is possible that they changed their mind in order to nullify the effect of not being able to change equipment. This is the issue when people look at one system and do not consider the effects of changes to another system. You need to have an overall view of interrelated systems when considering effects, which is just not what people are doing. After all, how can you express a view on Azerite gear when you don't know what the Azerite traits even do? Which brings me to the second possibility for the consternation. People don't seem to be paying any attention to the development of these systems. They are just inferring things from the beta, but the beta doesn't contain everything that the developers are doing, only what they want us testing, or what is ready for testing. But there are always things that are going to be implemented, and there are ways of finding out what those things are. Anyone who wants to discuss the development of any system in any meaningful way ought to find out what the developers' intentions for it are. Granted, they don't tend to make it easy to find this information, but it is available for anyone determined enough. There's a cracking quote from Sharp. Always know. How you find out is up to you, but always know. If you're not determined enough to find out what's actually going on, then you will always be building the foundations of your argument on shifting sand. It doesn't make your conclusion wrong, but because the building of it is wrong, Blizzard will instantly dismiss it. Quite frankly, one of the biggest reasons Blizzard make train wrecks of so many systems when people could see it coming months away is because it's very hard to focus their minds on the cogent arguments through all the noise. It has been especially bad for Battle for Azeroth as the developers have not been putting people right on the forums as often as they used to. Every single design philosophy that has received strong opposition from the player base is still going ahead. Every single one. But I guarantee that at the end of the Battle for Azeroth, when Ian Hazacostas is talking about lessons learned and what they're going to change for the following expansion, he will mention some of those systems as having not worked out. How do I know this? Because he's already done it for the Legion ideas that met the most opposition, and others have done so for previous expansions as well. I'm certainly not saying people should keep out. Indeed, I've called for people to be much more vocal on forums during development cycles. But just know that reactionary comments, especially ones which take no account of changes in other systems that are coming soon, make it more likely that a system will go live, not less. Think about it this way. The developers put a system in. Obviously, the balance of opinion was that it's a good idea. Someone comes along and says that it's a bad idea. Well, most people tend to get defensive when told that their work is bad. Now imagine that the argument they use is completely wrong. Well, it hardly matters whether the conclusion is correct or not. The person arguing clearly doesn't know what they're talking about, so it's easy to dismiss. Now everyone else making the same conclusion is much less likely to have their arguments considered, because the developer has seen so many that are just plain wrong. The bad system then goes live and doesn't get dealt with until it's blindingly obvious how disastrous it's been. But now it's live, so you either make a ham-fisted fix because you have to bodge something quickly, or you wait until the next expansion. So will being unable to switch Azerite pieces be a big deal for Mythic Plus dungeons? Well, the throughput traits are going to be weaker now. That's their current design aim, and they're not actually likely to change their mind at this point. The current strength of traits in the beta is actually super weak, but we think that Blizzard probably went a bit overboard and will be bringing it back up soon. In terms of disadvantaging classes, it's not like any class role combination could push the highest keys even in Legion. So the worst this system could do is nothing at all. If it advantaged some classes and disadvantaged others, for which there is no evidence that it would, then all you do is swap around which classes will be strong for dungeons this expansion, which may be different to previously. So the net effect is still 0, even though some individual players may end up being winners or losers. The thing is that people keep just assuming that some pieces would have awesome throughput traits but weak defensive ones, and others would have strong defensive traits and weak throughput ones. But they have only just started to be built into Simcraft in the past few days, some time after these people were complaining. In fact, there's very few of us who've even seen any of the results of these sims. Blizzard themselves have been keen to have Simcraft updated with them, and so we should expect some better balancing to take place over the next few weeks. Remember, this is not such high priority because this doesn't go live with the pre-patch, but not until the expansion itself. The only serious argument against locking equipment in dungeons is that there is no gameplay reason for doing so. It's another one of those design philosophies that someone has come up with because they felt like it. But nobody's really using that argument against it. It's apparently much more fun to decry hypothetical situations which aren't in line with reality of BFA design for either Mythic Dungeons or Azerite Traits. In fact, nobody ever seems to really use the argument of making changes for the sake of changes because that's what Blizzard do every expansion, and many people seem to support it. I personally believe in making changes only when there's going to be a benefit to players. I find it ridiculous that in a game where the core has remained relatively unchanged for a decade, that they have been unable to get classes into a good position. But that's because they haven't really had 10 years. Because they insist on making changes for the sake of change, they only get about 9 months every couple of years. Perhaps if people don't want perfectly good systems upsetting, then we should all as a community not be so excited about changes when new expansions are announced. Maybe we should focus on asking Blizzard to maintain the things that we like and worry less about fixing the things we don't. So I hope you found this video interesting. If you did, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe for further content. Comment with your thoughts below and I'll try and grab a couple for this Sunday's mailbox. Share with others who may also be interested, and until next time, I'll see you later.